Welcome back to our continuing series where we talk to professors, scholars, reporters, writers, philosophers, activists, anybody who can think clearly and has a perspective on political polarization in America. Many professors that we speak to are very busy. We respect that, and we respect the time that they can give us. We try to reach out to relevant people who studied in this field correctly and are experts in this particular field, and we try to talk to all of them, and we take what we can get. So today, we were very pleased to be able to get a big question answered by William BENDIX. William BENDIX is an assistant professor at the College of Arts and Sciences. Sorry, the air is particularly bad today. At Dakota State University. Professor of Political Science at Dakota State University, William BENDIX. He has a PhD in political science and MA in English and political science and a BA in English and political science. Teaches at Dakota State. Some of his particular expertise areas are Congress, presidency, public opinion, and national security law. That's how we found him. We'll get to his response in a second, but he wrote this article here, Polarization Events and Foreign Policy Committees. Beyond party ideological convictions and foreign policy conflicts in the U.S. Congress, January 2022. So he was looking at political polarization and how it affects foreign policy. Recent work finds evidence that partisan calculations, not ideological preferences, drive congressional decisions on foreign policy. While legislators support the wars launched by their party's presidents, they often oppose those by the other party's presidents. However, it is unclear whether such partisan calculations are limited to the narrow set of security votes or whether they are part of a broad pattern of foreign policy making in Congress. To examine the importance of partisan versus ideological motivations, we examine the substantive contributions legislators make to and the votes they cast on foreign policy measures. Specifically, we collect sponsorship and voting data on amendments that allow Congress to restrict presidential spending on defense programs and foreign aid. In analyzing data from 1971 to 2016, we find that ideology is the most consistent factor that determines whether legislators propose or support spending bills on security-related bills. So since 1971 to 2016, because there's very little reason to believe that between 2016 to 2022, basically the term of President Trump, that things have gotten better. So in analyzing data from 1971 to 2016, we find that ideology, not security for the country, not protecting America, is the most consistent factor that determines whether legislators propose or support spending limits on security bills. That's insane. So this was the question that I asked him. I wanted to ask you one question. Do you think there is any reason to believe that polarization will calm down on its own naturally, especially that you're given that your study looks at the year 1971 to 2016, and that you have found polarization when it relates to foreign policy spending by Congress on both sides, Democrats and Republicans, going back to 1971, about 50 years ago. So for the last half century, because it's 2023 now, Congress has been polarized politically when it comes to national defense. That's insane. So I asked them, I want to ask you one question. Do you think there's any reason that polarization will calm down on its own naturally? He's saying polarization's been around since 1971. And I'm like, will it calm down on its own? And here's his answer. In any discussion on U.S. political divisions, we need to distinguish between elite and mass polarization. We've talked about that a lot here. They are obviously related and often contribute to each other, but they can also be driven by different factors. We also need to think about partisan polarization versus ideological polarization versus social polarization. They too are obviously related, but not always. So are the elites polarized and not the mass public, or is the mass public actually polarized? That's what he's saying. Are we talking about partisan polarization where the two parties are politically different? Are we talking about ideological polarization where the ideologies are very different? And the party ideology and partisan polarization and ideological polarization can overlap, but they're technically separate. One's about party ID, I'm a Democrat or Republican. One specifically about I identify myself as a liberal or conservative, versus social polarization. Social polarization is the concept we've been talking about, where one side sees the other as the enemy and they don't want to hang out with them or marry or date them. They too are obviously related, but not always. Finally, to consider whether different polarization trends may change or moderate, we need to identify the multiple drivers for each one and see if whether institutional factors are in place that reinforce their effects. So answering your question comes with many caveats and clarifications. There are numerous books that explore polarization in America. Here are 2 recommendations: Nolan McCarty's Polarization, What Everyone Needs to Know, Liliana Mason's Uncivil Agreement. Already read both those. My research primary focus on Congress's role in shaping foreign policy and national security policy. I'm not a specific polarization expert, so I'm not the right in any case. Okay, yeah. So that wasn't really very helpful at all. He didn't actually answer the question at all. He just kind of framed how to think about the question and referred me to books that we already have and have already read. So that's disappointing. That's the first time I've seen somebody do an in-depth answer without actually answering the question. So you are the first professor to give an answer to the question that didn't answer the question at all. Normally when people give like a long paragraph answer, there's an actual answer in there. So sorry to the viewers at home. Wasn't expecting that. Yeah, don't know what to say. He framed the question and which was great, but we already knew that, and I was looking for an opinion from him. And after a very wordy reply, he said he had no opinion to give. So that is his right to do that. And we thank you, Professor, for taking the time to give us a response. We'll leave it there.